Hello and welcome to Carnivorist Chats. My name is James, your host. I started this podcast to help other folks share their own healing stories and to interview thought leaders and experts in the carnivore, keto, and low oxalate space. Before we begin, I'd like to give a shout out to Equip Foods and the Carnivore Bar. As an affiliate, you can use the link in the show notes to get a discount on their products when you check out using the code Carnivorist. Thanks in advance for listening, subscribing, and any likes or shares. And now, on with the podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Carnivorist Chats. I'm really excited today to be joined by Giselle Bisson, otherwise known as the Recovering Vegan. She has an incredible story to share about her journey from vegetarian and veganism and what happened to her. But I just want to say thank you, Giselle, for taking the time out to sit with me today and have this conversation. I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Oh, amazing.
Thank you for inviting me and for helping us be pioneers in spreading the word about this at a time when the whole world seems to be running off a cliff in the other direction. It's a tough time to be having this conversation.
It really is, Giselle. You know, before we hopped on here today, we were both on Instagram, and I don't know, we can just start on this point. I don't know if you noticed, but the more I advocate for not eating the vegan diet, the more Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook pushes the products or that way of eating and thinking towards me. So now my whole feed is filled with vegan stuff, even though I'm clearly not anymore. Do you find the same thing?
I haven't really noticed that, but I also intentionally follow the vegans to see what they're up to. But what I do notice is that somebody's been sending me gifts.
Oh,
the other day, a bag of groceries showed up on my doorstep, and it was a delivery, and I thought, oh, this is really weird, and this must be for somebody else, and it was full of vegan goodies.
Oh boy.
I know it must have come from a food company because 3 of the products were all the same. They were pretzel bites, pretzel breads. They were these, bake in the oven vegan pretzels. They came with a little packet of pretzel salt. And obviously nobody would have ordered all 3 kinds of pretzel breads if that was a delivery. It was interesting, and I've been receiving various gifts that all somehow end up being vegan.
Giselle, I've heard you share your story. And again, I just want to say thank you for being a voice out there. I know how many people now follow you on Twitter, on Instagram, on all your social channels, and we can talk about where people can find you later on. It is so important in this space. And that's the whole reason that I started my account and this podcast and sharing photos of myself just to warn people about the dangers of eating the vegan diet. We all learned, unfortunately, the hard way. And I think, through telling your story before, and you and I discussed this prior, is that I think we really should start out today where your health really started going off a cliff. And I'll share some of my story with you after you share yours, because I'm sure the folks have heard mine before, but yours is quite incredible of what happened to you in terms of your health. So please do.
I was plant-based for a very long time. I started in the 1980s as a vegetarian, back before even the word vegan wasn't invented yet. We never heard this word vegan or veganism, but in those days it was vegetarian, and you learned about vegetarianism through these wonderful cookbooks and restaurants, and also through different spiritual organizations like the Esalen Institute. I'd go to Esalen and they had an all-vegetarian meal plan when you visited the Esalen Hot Springs or you went there for a workshop. Harbin Hot Springs, also vegetarian. There was a meat-free kitchen there. I started going there in the 1980s. Different ashrams where, as part of doing yoga, you did karma yoga, which was working in the kitchen and preparing vegetarian food. The shift to vegan happened in the early 2000s, and I became a raw vegan certified chef. And that was when I had noticed health problems earlier on in my journey, and those were usually related to blood sugar. I would have these blood sugar swings and crashes. I was in my 20s. I was very athletic. I worked out a lot. I was an outdoor and wilderness enthusiast. I skied uphill and downhill, backcountry telemarking. I was a rock climber. I was a mountain climber. I went to the Himalayas. I climbed the highest peak in California, Mount Whitney. I was a jock. I was like a super shredded jock girl. And I remember when I climbed Mount Whitney, I had a very hard time with the altitude and got severe altitude sickness. This is a 14,000 plus foot mountain. And that was after I climbed in the Himalayas. And both of those times I was doing those climbs on a protein deficient, mostly vegetarian or vegetarian diet, especially in the Himalayas where I was eating Nepalese food, which was dal bhat, dal, beans, and peas, and rice, and maybe a little bit of potato, a little bit of yak butter in your tea. But it was not a lot of calories, not a lot of nutrition. I would slog my way through these experiences, and it was after one of those climbs, Whitney, I had a severe miscarriage, and I lost my baby at 5.5 months. Now, this is a very personal story, and I don't usually tell this to anybody. I never told anyone, even my mother, about this. But now that I'm starting to become kind of a public figure, and I realize that a lot of young women who want to conceive might be listening, I now look back and realize that my malnourishing diet probably had a lot to do with my infertility and repeated miscarriages, but particularly that one where I lost so much blood that I ended up in the ER, in surgery, blood transfusions, and almost lost my life. So not only did I lose the baby, but it was life-threatening. After that, I was unable to conceive over and over and over again for the rest of my fertile years. And after that, I started having other problems. And right after I went vegan in 2002, the first thing that I noticed is I would get very cold. Even in bright sunlight, it'd be like 100 degrees outside and I was shivering and cold. So my body became very intolerant of extremes of heat and also extremes of cold. But even when there was adequate heat or had problems regulating my body temperature, the next problem was I was spaced out. I was so spacey and so shaky, especially in the morning. And now I realize this is from the overall lack of nourishment and lack of proper fat intake, proper, really, the vegan diet was just so extremely, extremely malnourishing that I would start to make, that day I was making my cup of green tea, my nice healthy green tea in the morning, and I spilled the boiling hot tea all over myself because I was so shaky. And I ended up in the emergency room with third-degree burns over 1/5 of my body and went into shock. That should have been a wake-up call, but no. Right? I did eat meat briefly, though, after that accident because I heard from the ER doctor and also from reading on the internet and reading the prescription for natural healing that a high protein diet would help you recover from burns. So I did eat protein for a little while, maybe six weeks while I was recovering from that burn. And I also put vitamin E oil directly on the burn, as the doctor told me to do. I had to put vitamin E oil on it every day, and I did manage to completely recover from that burn. But then I went back to raw veganism again. It's interesting that I was doing veganism both for the health of the planet and for ostensibly my own health and my spiritual practice, but it sent me to the doctor or the emergency room over and over and over again. And ironically, when you go to the ER, what do you end up doing? You end up having prescription drugs, right? The very thing you're trying to avoid, you end up doing more. I had urinary tract infections, which required antibiotics. I had a huge boil appear on my face that had to be lanced by a plastic surgeon, drained, antibiotics. I would get these swellings in my joints where my elbows would puff out or my knees would puff out in this freakish way. Again, they required lancing and antibiotics. I went to Hawaii, stubbed my toe. I ended up with sepsis. Sepsis that not only did my toe swell up huge, just enormous, my foot was infected and full of pus, which had to be lanced and drained, but I had to go on antibiotics again and again and again. I would get these infections. I went to Mexico. That was when I was really starting to hit rock bottom. This was in 2012. Got so sick, I ended up just in a tent, vomiting, diarrhea, over a month of being sick while my vegan friends came and checked on me to make sure I was alive. Finally got out of that by taking antibiotics and seeing a doctor. And you would have thought that 2012 was my rock bottom, right? By then, and this is part of the vegan journey, is I went from being a successful corporate executive, six-figure income, owning my own house in one of the most expensive places to own a house in the entire world, one of the most expensive neighborhoods in one of the most expensive cities, San Francisco. I had a brand new car. I was on top of the world before I went vegan. And as I went further and further into veganism, my brain function, my energy, my appearance took a nosedive, and so did my income. And you start hanging out with other vegans all the time, and oh wow, they're all in the same boat, right? I also had very bad skin as a vegan. Look at my skin now. I'm 60. I would dream of skin like this in my 20s, 30s, and 40s. And I spent a fortune going to various doctors, dermatologists. Again, what do the doctors prescribe? They prescribe exactly what you're trying to avoid, which is antibiotics, topical antibiotics, topical Retin-A. None of this stuff worked. And I remember my rock bottom in skincare was when I paid $800 for an Obagi skincare treatment that only made my skin worse. I had cystic acne. These are like hard cysts that you can't pop or you can't, they're not like regular acne. There's no fluid in them. And they're painful. And I would also get these red blotches all over my skin. And makeup couldn't disguise any of this. And I used to spend money on facials, on peels. Eventually, around the age of 40, I got some Botox. I started getting fillers to counteract very extreme nasolabial folds. Look, I'm 60 now. I don't have the folds, the nasolabial folds and wrinkles that I had when I was 40 as a vegan. And I don't have the skin problems anymore either. My skin has never looked this good, as it has, and it just keeps getting better and better on the carnivore diet. It was getting great on a keto diet, but it's really eliminating all the plants that makes the difference. But again, talking about the beauty problems, my hair was falling out. Not just falling out, but like handfuls. Really scary. Like you go in the shower and you're washing your hair and clumps of hair are falling out and clogging the drain. Hair is breaking off. It wouldn't grow any longer than my shoulders. Now my hair is, well down the middle of my back. I had extremely dry, brittle, frizzy hair, and so I spent a lot of money on treatments, on hair care regimens. It also starts prematurely going gray. I ended up with anemia, the kind of severe anemia where, you go to the doctor and they prescribe this iron pills and say you need to eat iron. They never say you need to eat meat. I would take iron tonics when I was on my period, which got scantier and scantier as a vegan to the point of sometimes I had no period at all. I lost my menses, and other vegans would say that's good because your period is detoxing. And when you lose your period, that means you don't have any more of those awful, nasty meat toxins. You're no longer detoxing all that toxic stuff. You're getting clean. In fact, losing your period altogether is the ultimate in health. That's what the vegans told me. As I went into my 50s, I got the gushing periods where you end up with literally knees of weakness, shaking, severe iron loss, severe blood loss, clots. And all of this stuff should have sent me running to the doctor. But again, the further you go into these vegan communities, the more people are anti doctor and anti mainstream medicine. Oh, it's mainstream medicine that's making us sick. It's mainstream food that's making us sick. We need to go completely organic. We need to detox more. And, my vegan friends would say things like, you need to go on a water fast. Juice cleanse isn't enough. You need to go on a water fast, or you need to go on an all juice cleanse. Go to one of these retreats. I just went to this retreat in Puerto Rico, or I just went to this retreat in San Diego where they gave me nothing but wheatgrass juice enemas and raw juices. And these retreats cost, $3,000. Of course, by then I couldn't afford it anymore, so didn't get to go on the juice detox retreat. This was now we're getting to about 2015. My health improved a little bit in 2014 because I went gluten free and started eating some eggs for a while, then went back to not eating eggs because I didn't know the chickens personally. I wouldn't eat grocery store eggs. I would only eat my eggs or my friends' eggs or eggs where I personally fed the chickens and knew what their lives were like. This was around the time that I started noticing that people were starting to die. And the first shocking death was a woman younger than me in my lovely little small town I was living in that was mostly vegan, where we had a grocery store that was mostly vegan, where we had a hot bar in the grocery store that everybody went to, in the health food store that was 100% vegan, where they had this incredible array of vegan green soups and juices and smoothies. Oh, completely organic. There wasn't anything in this store that wasn't organic. And this is where everybody in town ate, right? Everybody shopped here. Everybody hung out here. This was the hub of social activity. And now there's a bench in front of that health food store dedicated to the first vegetarian in our community who died. She was a vegetarian activist, Deb Hub Smith, and a bicycle activist, and beautiful and healthy and younger than me. And she died of cancer. And everybody said, how could a vegetarian, such a healthy person, get cancer, die of cancer? She was the first. And then my best friend, who wasn't 100% vegetarian, but like all of us was mostly vegan. One of my best friends went to a juice cleanse retreat, came back and quickly got liver cancer. Started vomiting blood. Turned out she had liver cancer, had tumors that were inoperable, was not a candidate for a liver transplant. Quickly, very suddenly died. Shortly after she died, there was another. Then people started taking their lives. My best friend killed herself. That completely shook us to the core. Then a few other people killed themselves. Then a vegan yoga teacher in our community jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. And everyone said, well, how could a vegan be depressed? How could this beautiful yoga teacher who was so healthy, nobody put it together, right? I started thinking, gosh, I wonder if it has anything to do with what we eat. But when you're living in a vegan echo chamber and you have vegan tunnel vision, It's really hard to see any other way. The decline in my health, honestly, I didn't really think about it much anymore because at that point, the deep fatigue, the inability to sleep, the brain fog, the blurry vision, the acne, the bloating, the digestive problems that you start having at this point, after 15 years of veganism, of over 30 years of mostly being vegetarian or plant-based with occasional forays into fish or eggs, but no red meat. My health and my brain function got worse and worse and worse. I did start rebounding at some point. My career was rebounding and things were going really great. And then I was in a car accident. And overnight, that was, you think you've hit rock bottom, right? Every time you think you've hit rock bottom, there's another level of rock bottom that's deeper that you can go to. And I now think that that accident saved my life. Because had I not been in the accident, I wouldn't have gone to the doctor. And had I not been in the accident, I wouldn't have had MRIs. And it was what the spinal cord injury did to me, and I'm not really allowed to discuss it, but it triggered latent autoimmune diseases in my nervous system. And the way the doctor described this to me is we don't understand why this happens, but sometimes this happens when there's a trauma, a physical trauma. It can release these latent diseases that are in your nervous system. The nervous system is a very mysterious thing. And again, we're only learning about these things now. This is all sort of new information because never before in history, in human history, have humans voluntarily agreed to forego our most essential nutrient, our most essential food. We're voluntarily doing this. It's not through famine, poverty, or starvation, or a poor hunt. It's we're volunteering, we're signing up for it. So I had the car accident. I suddenly started having these things happen in my body that had never happened before. And the pain was, I guess if I described the rock bottom, it was lying in a fetal position because that was the only way I could tolerate the all over body pain from multiple injuries and from whatever had been triggered inside my body. But it's hard to describe a pain so intense that it's like an electric shock that's moving through your body, head to toe. Like your whole body is being shocked with electricity, and there's no way to make it stop. There isn't a painkiller that stops this. Not opiates, nothing. Nothing stops it. You just cry. I would just cry and I'd be in a fetal position because by curving my spine, I was able to have a little bit less pain and I would struggle to sleep. And the chiropractor I was seeing at that time, I went into his office, and I said, I can't sleep. I just can't sleep. I just lie and stare at the ceiling all night and I'm in so much pain. And he said, what do you eat for breakfast? What do I eat for breakfast? Oh, I, eat a healthy breakfast. I like to have like a bagel with hummus and a nice big green smoothie. But first I have the green smoothie. First I have a fruit smoothie, then I have the green smoothie, then I have the bagel with hummus, so I have more protein. Um, he
I'm
said,
having flashbacks right now in my own diet. This is taking me right back to Giselle. Oh, the same things, the
all
same
the same
things.
things. And he shook his head and he said, you need to start your day with protein.
Good man.
And he said, you need to eat protein snacks. And here, uh, I'm going to prescribe to you that you take omega-3 fish oil. And he gave me a omega-3 6-9 balanced fish oil supplement. At this point, I was so broke that I could barely afford the supplements. I was so tired and in so much pain, I could barely walk to his office. I couldn't sleep, but I started taking the fish oil and I started doing what he said, which was protein in the morning, first thing, protein snacks, and protein before bed. And he explained to me the reason why you do this is because of cortisol. And he explained to me what cortisol is and the role of cortisol in our metabolism and our sleep cycle. And he started to explain to me what pain was, and that pain is caused by inflammation. I didn't know that. I didn't even know what inflammation was. Right? So every time I went to his office and I saw him, I don't know, 70 times, I went in for these treatments. And as he was treating me, I would pick his brain about nutrition. And he and his wife were something I'd never really encountered before. They were paleo. And he kept little dishes of nuts in the office for snacks. And he encouraged people to snack on nuts instead of sugary things. And he looked fantastic, and so did she. And he was very rippled, muscular, healthy, tanned, super vibrant looking guy. He was kind of a guru to all of these healthy people coming in and out of the office who were actors in Hollywood. It was a Hollywood chiropractor. And my health did start to improve a little bit. But again, I was still not eating red meat yet in any regular fashion. I wasn't really eating a high protein diet. I hadn't made the shift yet. I finally got an MRI. I saw the inside of my body, and not only did I have horrible injuries, I had very severe degenerative spinal conditions that were exacerbated by the injury, and very brittle bones, very weak ligaments. I had severe inflammation inside my body, which was visible. I had tumors, hundreds and hundreds of, not related to the injury, but I had hundreds and hundreds of tumors throughout my uterus. Hundreds. And one of the tumors was so big that it was blocking my bladder. Big, gigantic tumor that you could see right on the MRI. Don't even need to be a doctor to see this. I had tumors on the top of my cervix. And that was alarming to me. I thought, wait a minute. I've been eating this healthy diet, green smoothie every day, taking all these supplements. What's going on here? Ask the doctor, and he says, oh, this is normal. Everybody has these. By the time women are your age, they're loaded with these. They're benign tumors. They're fibroids, and they'll go away as you get older. Don't worry about it. I'm like, really? Started Googling and trying to get to the bottom of what was going on inside my body. I found out what these diseases were from what the neurologists were writing in the reports, and one of them was something called myelopathy. So I looked up myelopathy in Google, and the first article that comes up is written by the vegetarian doctor, Dr. Greger. And he says, vegans are so special, they even have a disease named after them. It's called vegan myelopathy. This is rapidly becoming a bigger and bigger problem. And if you go into PubMed and Google the words vegetarian or vegan and myelopathy, you'll see dozens of studies and case history reports of vegetarians who, after prolonged vitamin B12 deficiency, end up with these abnormalities in their spinal cords. So I believe that we're going to be seeing more and more of these catastrophic outcomes from relatively minor injuries as more and more people become long-term vegans. Those of us who are long-term vegans are like the canaries in the coal mine. We're the pioneers. And those of us who are still alive, like me, to tell the story And people like Sally Norton and the more and more influencers on social media. And you'll notice that one thing a lot of us have in common is we're over the age of 50 and we were vegetarian or vegan for a very long time. And we're now experiencing chronic health issues that we're trying to unravel and solve based on um, years and years and years of malnourishment. And it's taken our collective wisdom and sharing of information, people like you, other podcasters, Dr. Saladino, who was also vegan, many of the leading voices you're now seeing are coincidentally people who used to be
You,
plant-based diets.
Giselle, you have mentioned this before as well, and it goes back to when you first discovered veganism. But I'm not sure if you're aware. You probably are, but Sally Norton herself credits this book for converting her into a plant-based eater back in the day, and that was Diet for a New Planet.
I read that, yeah. That's
Yeah,
one of
so
the influences for me too.
yeah, and I heard you say that, and it's really interesting to see in just you talking about how all now the people that are realizing the detriment and what's happening, and as you say, 50 plus year olds, Sally and yourself and myself, and talking about what has happened, with this plant-based charge that really geared up a notch or a few notches in the last decade or so, and it's really sad. And we're going to get into your thoughts on how pervasive it is and who's behind this, and going to the grocery store now, and you've often showed me what you think of those so-called healthy vegan foods. But I mean, you then have discovered these tumors in your body. You're very weak. What happened next? Thank goodness for that doctor that sort of talked to you about eating some protein and cutting down on foods. At what point did you say to yourself, okay, I've got to make a change?
It still took time, and it was around that period of time that I was so weak, in so much pain, so depleted, so unable to even my fingers weren't working. I couldn't type on a computer. My brain wasn't functioning well enough to do basic intellectual tasks. I couldn't remember passwords. So one thing I was able to do though was hold up my smartphone and dictate into Siri and look at Twitter. And so I was able to browse Twitter. I joined Twitter as recovering vegan, and I chose that name just on a lark as kind of it was ironic, right? I'm recovering from veganism. It's as if I'm recovering from a heroin addiction, from alcoholism. I didn't really realize at that point yet that that's exactly what it was. It was recovering from an eating disorder, a psychological eating disorder where we've somehow been convinced to voluntarily give up proper human nourishment to save the animals. Is this even logical? To save the planet? Is this even logical? The planet was fine for a really long time when we ate nothing but animals. The planet was fine when animals roamed, bison in greater numbers than we have today, roamed North America and obviously generated methane, but that wasn't causing climate change. I mean, the stories that were given, these excuses, the reasons for this voluntary starvation are illogical. But again, I that light bulb had not gone on yet. I was lying on the couch, unable to do anything but dictate into my cell phone. I became the recovering vegan anonymously and chose this photo hiding behind a bunch of kale because I didn't want my friends and family to know that I was even following doctors and ketogenic diet gurus on the internet. That's how much I was afraid of being known as even thinking about this, let alone eating it, right? And it was as I started reading, at that time, Jane Buxton had not yet written her book. Sally Norton had not yet written her book. Dr. Saladino had not yet written his book. He hadn't even appeared on Rogan yet. Jordan Peterson had not yet gone carnivore. This was, 4 years ago. And so I started following these ketogenic diet influencers and try to figure out what keto was, because a disabled friend of mine told me that some people were having success in chronic pain or disability and injury recovery by going on a keto diet. Now, I had never heard this before. I didn't know what keto was. I didn't know what ketosis was. So I started learning, following people. I discovered Sean Baker. I discovered Dr. Saladino. I discovered some of the other influencers at that time who were talking about Diet Doctor, and I started learning about carbohydrates. And again, I didn't know anything about this. Like, you think you're such a know-it-all, you're a trained vegan chef, you're following all the vegan health gurus. Nobody ever talks about carbohydrates. Nobody ever talks about ketosis. Nobody ever talks about omega-6, omega-3 fatty acids. You're deliberately kept in the dark about this knowledge, because if you knew, there's no way you would go on a plant-based diet, right? But I started unraveling and learning the truth about human nutrition, and what a shocker, right? And I gradually started reading labels. And the light bulb went on one day, I'll never forget, when I started learning about carbs and trying to keep my carbs below 40 per day. And I read the label on some smoked salmon, and it said 0 carbohydrates. What? 0? There's no carbs in this? Where do you get your energy? Right? I thought you needed carbohydrates for energy. And 0 sugar, 0 carbohydrates, but very high in omega-3 fatty acids, loads of protein, not very many calories though. Wow, what a mystery. And I saw the incredible density of nutrients in this little tiny 3-ounce piece of smoked salmon. And I started looking at the carbs and nutrition in other things I was eating, like hummus, or beans, or gluten-free breads, and coconut almond flour goodies, and all the other things that I was supposedly getting my protein from. And the light bulb went on, and I started realizing that the nutrition, dollar for dollar, in this little piece of smoked salmon or an egg or a piece of cheese was so vastly superior to what I was getting from the plant kingdom. But the light bulb still hadn't gone on, because going from eating nothing but a plant-based diet and no meat for years and years and years to suddenly eating meat does not happen overnight. It's a process. And I liken that process to sort of undoing the brainwashing. There's no other way of putting it. I'll just be blunt. I think we've been lied to deliberately. We've been duped, tricked, brainwashed into believing the opposite of our proper human diet. It's taken me a couple of years to reach this conclusion. It was a gradual process, and I think for anyone out there who's beginning to suspect that maybe your vegan diet isn't serving you, or your largely plant-based diet could have a role in your health problems, you're going to have to go through the same detective process, the same gradual awakening that you and I went through to get to this point. We have more information available now, but it's still it takes a really long time to unlearn everything that you've learned.
Such a very important point, Giselle, because I shared, as you know, and like to share pictures of before and my current physical and mental state, because it's an important and social media loves that type of thing. But I keep having to remind folks, we did not get sick overnight. This took many years of doing this.
Took years.
So, expect healing to take some time. And I still am. I have mostly good days right now, which is fantastic, but I also have some bad days. We were sharing before we started today, you've had some, and I have too. And
I
through the
have to,
wisdom,
yeah.
through the wisdom of Sally Norton and the oxalate dumping, which we now know, oh my goodness, I shudder to think the amount of high oxalate foods at the end there when I was prescribed these juice smoothies with kale, chia, and spinach seeds every day, 3 times a day. I blended these things up, Giselle, like a madman. And because I was told I needed to go harder and detox, and it was, coffee enema time and these smoothies with chia seeds, spinach, almond milk, that's all
You
you're
did the
drinking.
celery juice?
I did the celery juice. I
Oh
did it all.
no, not the celery juice!
I did
Not the
all that.
celery juice!
Did that in the morning. Um, and it nearly killed me. And
What about the spirulina?
I did the spirulina.
Vitamineral green?
I did it
I
all.
did giant jars of that stuff. I still have it. I should just donate it to a food bank.
And what you hit on also, Giselle, is so important because folks see a picture of me in my emaciated, malnourished state. And people often forget, and you talked about it, and I'm so sorry to hear about your friends that took their own lives or jumped off the bridge. And the severe depression that came along. I mean, you look at the look on my face in those photos. I did not realize how severely depressed I became.
Mm.
I literally at the end there, I'm sure, and I'll let you speak in a second, but at the end stages there, when I was at my worst, I used to pray some days to just please take me out of this pain.
Yeah,
I was laying
yeah.
in bed, 127 pounds, depressed, sick, skin cracking, nails cracking, hair falling out. I was thinking, is this what my rest of my life's going to be like?
What about your teeth?
Oh, the teeth were terribly bleeding all the time. I used to go to the
Mhm.
dentist and I would just have blood everywhere. I should have, you hit on another thing. Early on in my vegetarian stages, I had, like you, a lot of infections and I was prescribed a lot of antibiotics. As a male, I'm not ashamed to, we're sharing stories here today because I want this to impact folks. I used to have these reoccurring epididymitis infections, which is a swelling of the testes. They thought it was bacterial infection and it
Oh
was so
no.
painful. Without painting even more of a graphic picture, oh, I'll do it. It's like having a vice grip tightening on your male genitalia all the time. It was so painful. And I would go to the emergency room and they would give me ciprofloxacin every time. I took so much of that stuff, it destroyed my gut. I should
And
have,
might have destroyed your tendons too.
it sure did. It sure did. And we know that, as you know, when they talk about getting floxed. And I should have noticed that. Then, like you, I started passing out all the time. I was cold all the time. There's a
Oh, I
mark on.
forgot about the times I passed out and the EMTs had to come.
There's a split on my forehead where I
Yeah.
struggle to give blood somewhere around. It's right here, I believe, right here. I struggle to give blood because I couldn't. My veins wouldn't expose themselves because I didn't. And if I did, I would end up passing out afterwards. So I gave blood one day, and I was going out of the doctor's office, and I fell down the stairs. And as I did so, how I didn't pull my eye out, I struck a door handle on my fall down, and fell down the stairs and knocked myself unconscious. And they came and found me, and I was bleeding from my head. And these
Was that
things
your rock bottom or did you go further?
that was in the sort of beginning stages where it couldn't have been the diet, and I felt like a human pincushion because they were testing me all for autoimmunity. They thought I had hepatitis, I had chronic Epstein-Barr, I was constantly fatigued. And here's the other thing: not only did the vegan diet affect me, and I want to touch on this point with you in a second, Giselle, because you eloquently put this. Not only did it affect me physically and mentally, it also affected me financially because
Yes, of
I got
course.
put on disability at my job because I couldn't think straight. I was losing weight. I
Mhm.
was constantly calling in sick, so I got put on disability, and then eventually I ended up losing my job. And at
Of
the
course.
time, they blamed it on the pandemic, but I knew it was because I was not able to function in my daily duties. And it's an important point when you look back, and it's not good sometimes to dwell on the past, but it's an important point.
Now it's not just taking away from my life because of loss of income, loss of ability to think, depression, lack of motivation, more uh, likely to spill hot water on yourself or have an accident. But at the point that I became disabled from my injury, suddenly I was a burden on other people. And now that I'm one of the healthy ones, everybody else is a burden on me, right? I find that my life is consumed with taking care of other people, helping prop other people up because please share my GoFundMe, come to my fundraiser, come over to my house and make soup for me because I have cancer. Um, I'm caretaking my mother who had a stroke. I've got another important person in my life just announced that they have MS. Another person very close to me is having mental health problems. And all of this impacts me, it impacts society. And now we have on top of all of this COVID. And if your immune system is very depleted, if you're very weak, you can't fight off infections as well. And you're more likely to end up with long COVID. You're more likely to get very sick with COVID. You're more likely to end up with cancer or an autoimmune disease that severely affects your ability to function. And, we lift each other up. As a society, the stronger we are as individuals, the stronger we are collectively. And so why are we allowing this to happen in a first world country where cattle are everywhere, where eggs, as expensive as they've become, I can still get a carton of pastured eggs for $3.99. I can get a pound of grass-fed beef for $4.99. It's not expensive. It really isn't to properly nourish yourself, and yet we're voluntarily giving all that up and eating fake substitutes. We're giving up real, honest to goodness, wholesome milk for oat water, for almonds mixed with water. This isn't logical.
It really isn't. It really
No.
isn't.
And what does it take to convince masses of people to fall for this? It's a massive marketing campaign. We have, what I like to say is, let's take the food pyramid and turn it upside down. Now, when you turn the food pyramid upside down, you get a more realistic vision of what we should really be eating. The fats, the meat, the fish, the proteins are at the top of the pyramid, but in this small amount. They should be at the top of the pyramid in a large amount. And as we get towards the grains, that should be the smallest amount of consumption. It's more that these grains and the starches and should be emergency foods in times when we can't get uh, the proteins. And instead, we've somehow been convinced to do the opposite. And at a certain point, it doesn't even take convincing anymore, because plants are intelligent and plants have formed over millions of years, have created chemicals that get us high. Is there anything that comes from an animal that gets you high besides, I think there's something that a toad generates that's psychedelic, toad venom or something. But other than that, all the things that get us high and get us addicted come from the plant kingdom. Cannabis, right? THC, heroin from the opium poppy. We have alcohol, which is fermented plants. We have sugar, but you have most of the things that are a real problem in our society that are highly addictive initially came from plants. Now they're synthesized. You have these synthetic drugs that are synthesized from to mimic what's in nature. But plants are also highly addictive from gluten, from carbohydrates and starches and sugars. That there are also flavors that plants create to, that they're yummy, especially the sweet ones, because that plant wants to be eaten. The fruit wants to be eaten. So we will take their seeds in, which is their babies, and poop them out, to be graphic. And that excrement, when an animal or a human eats the fruit and the seeds go into the soil with that fertilizer, that enables the seed to reproduce and become a plant. So this is all part of their strategy. They create these beautiful flowers that smell lovely, and that gets us to grow the plant or to protect the plant. It gets the bees to come and pollinate the plant. These are not stupid or inferior to animals. Plants have a high intelligence. They're very conscious, and they have developed and evolved with strategies for survival. And I think one of the ways that plants are surviving is through these addictive and delicious properties.
You know, as we sort of wind down a little bit, you started the Recovering Vegan page, and you went viral
Instantly.
instantly. It was, which is incredible, and I'm so happy for you that you did, because you're reaching so many people with your story, which is really important. How can we be more proactive and affect change? Is it just through warning folks? I know you're planning to write a book, are you not?
I should be writing a book, but I've been too busy recovering. You know, the first wonderful thing, I went carnivore, as most of the world now knows, on January 1, which was 90 days ago. And that was just totally on a lark. I posted on Twitter, yeah, I'm thinking of going on the carnivore challenge. And that went viral, reached 275,000 people. Once your New Year's resolutions reach 275,000 people, you're kind of committed. So that was a very powerful motivation to stick with it. And I think I didn't realize, I thought I had recovered quite a bit through over 2 years of eating meat again and on a keto diet. But wow, now that I'm seeing what real health is, I realized that I wasn't that healthy yet. I was just healthier than I was as a rock bottom end stage vegan, by adding the fats and the meat and the fish and other things that I was eating back into my diet. But I wasn't eating enough protein, wasn't eating enough fat, and I was eating too many plants and carbohydrates. And within the first month of going carnivore, I lost 9 pounds. I didn't even realize I had that much weight to lose. I've now lost 21 pounds. And the difference in my brain function was so dramatic, and my ability to type again. I mean, I'm back to being able to go type 65 words a minute, and my writing is back on fire. So as my health improves and I have more good days and fewer oxalate dumping days and pain flare days, I hope to write that book and start, as I'm looking more attractive and feel more confident on camera, I'll be doing more video too.
I'm sure you've received a lot of vegan hate now that you've switched over.
Oh yeah.
How are you dealing with that? I mean, I'm starting to get mine. I don't have nearly as many followers as you, but I'm starting to get mine simply because I'm really pushing the story out there in hopes that we can warn folks. But how are you dealing with it?
The first time I got the hate, it was scary. I had death threats. Um, I was advised by some other influencers in the carnivore community, like Kim Menick, Kim Menick has been a real help. Sally Norton, all of the leading influencers were messaging me behind the scenes, giving me advice, giving me help, coaching me. And they said, Cam said, block. You have to block these people. If you have haters, if you're getting death threats, block and report. So not only have I blocked and reported, but have also asked others in the community to block and report these people. And what we start to learn, I do social media professionally. I know this might harm my credibility, by admitting that I was a journalist, trained as a journalist, went to journalism school, worked in magazine journalism. And so I know a lot about public relations and marketing and how you influence public opinion and how you influence people. And I've encountered nasty trolls before working for clients in my job. And what we have to do is block them, unfriend them, report them, and silence them. Don't feed the trolls. So that's pretty easy to do in social media. I've also ignored the trolls that have been making videos about me on YouTube. I haven't even watched the videos, but there are videos circulating accusing me of lying, um, never being vegan. They combed. I mean, these trolls obviously are paid. They're obviously well funded because they took the time to tediously comb through every post I've made in social media in my entire lifetime. They did some very deep detective work to find, I don't know, one time I said I ate fish. You know, I was at a party. This was when I was rock bottom in my low stage of veganism. I was working a press conference. There was a plate, the nearest plate to me had salmon skewers on it. And I grabbed some. I was starving and I ate them. You know, I was busy. I was working an event. This was like the closest plate to where I was. It was in a professional situation. There wasn't any tofu. This is what there was to eat, and I was hungry. And I posted it because they were beautiful, and I wanted to brag about what my client was doing and the beautiful food they were serving. So, you know, sometimes when I posted or I made some meal kits, and there was a contest. If you made the meal kits to post a picture on Instagram, you might win a prize. So I posted the meal kit, which I made for a friend who ate pork. But these vegans are accusing me of eating pork, of eating fish. I mean, guys, if I ate fish even once in 18 years, it wasn't enough. I don't even want to eat anything anymore unless it's basically from a ruminant animal. I've learned to listen to my body and how I feel and how I function after eating a plant and after eating the proper human diet, which is ancestral, animal based nutrition, primarily from animals that are ruminants. Google it, look it up. A ruminant is an animal with multiple stomachs, and they take plants and eat plants. They're herbivores, and they can convert that sunlight and that energy from the plant into a form that we can really utilize. Because while it's true that that nutrition is in the grass or in the seed, it's not in a form that humans can really take advantage of with our digestive system. But the ruminant can do that for us, and that's why we have prized those foods. That's why the cow is sacred.
Giselle, Bisson, this has been an absolute, I could talk to you all day. I really could. So I want to say thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. Thank you for inspiring others through your social media presence and content, because, you know, I came across you and I was like, a fellow person that unfortunately has gone through similar journey to what I went through, but has now, like myself, seen the light, and also, as you just eloquently put it, consumed it by either ruminant animal meat that we're getting, and feeling the benefits of adding this nutrition back into our diets, being revitalized even, you know, as we get older, and feeling 10 to 15 years younger. With
Yes.
all that being said, Giselle, where can folks go to find you? Where should we send them to go find you? Twitter and Instagram. Where
Thank
are
you.
you looking?
I'm at the Recovering Vegan on Instagram and Vegan Recovering or Recovering Vegan on Twitter. That's sort of my main channel. I'm also on Facebook at Recovering Vegan. And I'll be doing more social media in the coming months and
Amazing.
write that book. I've
Please,
already had an agent contact me.
please do write it, Giselle. Please do. It'll be so important. I think, you know, I liken, you know, and on this note is that I liken Sally Norton's book, Toxic Superfoods, as a seminal moment in terms of this moving away from this agenda that is driven. Dr. Baker's appearance on Joe Rogan, another seminal moment for the carnivore diet and advocating for eating more animal nutrition. And if you write a book about your testimony, it will just surely be another one. So thank you, Giselle Bisson, for everything that you do. You're an inspiration. It has been an absolute honor chatting with you today. And I hope that folks benefit from this podcast. I know they will, in fact. And I look forward to hopefully being able to host you again, where we can continue to go down this road, continue to talk about issues that are surrounding that way of eating and the benefits that we're gaining from adding animal nutrition back into our lives. Thank you once again, Giselle. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Carnivorist Chats. If you've made it this far, I want to say thank you for listening, and also thank you in advance for liking, subscribing, or sharing this episode. Thanks again to the good folks at Carnivore Bar and Equip Foods. Don't forget to check the link in the show notes to get a discount on their products. Until the next time, be well.